Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me. So this class is going to be a rapid fire version of my two-finger script ring. So if you want the full version, if you're a total beginner and you need some extra time and guidance, please check out the full pre-recorded version. But this is just going to be a run through, show you the step. You can pause and copy. So this will be very, very fast with very little additional dialogue. So jumping right in, to give you an overview, so this is the ring itself. For this class, you're going to need to know your ring size. Both finger holes will be the same ring size unless you choose to go otherwise, which is fine. You will also need to decide what this width is in this direction and this width in this direction. In this case, it's 2 millimeters for me, and it's the same in both directions, so it's a square cross section. Okay, so the way that this class is going to go is we are going to first model these two ring shanks, and then we are going to model the connection point, and then we are going to trim away all this excess metal of the shanks, and then the last thing will be the word or the script itself. So jumping right in, you'll want to create a new Tinkercad window, create new design. Okay, so the first steps is, as I said, to get the ring shanks together. So to do that, we're going to take a cylinder from the Basic Shapes menu and drop it roughly in the center of the work plane. We're going to reposition this cylinder by rotating it 90 degrees and then resizing it to our ring size. So in my case, I'm a ring size 6, which is 16.5 millimeters. If you need to find your ring size, you can look at the full class description in the comments of the video itself. I have all sizes from 5 to 13 listed, so feel free to pull that there or follow along if you're a size 6. So we're going to resize this to be the inner diameter or the ring size. So I'm changing 20 to 16.5, which again is a size 6, and 16.5. So you now have a perfect cylinder in your ring size. We are also going to change the side measurement to, in my case, 2 millimeters because I want to have a 2 millimeter thick band. We also want to increase the number of sides to remove these faceted faces. So clicking on the cylinder, increase the number of sides to 64, and now we have a nice smooth cylinder. So at this point, we're going to duplicate and hide. So duplicate, hide. So now I have one cylinder left, and I can see that I'm hidden up here. And I'm now going to resize the cylinder, so I'm now basically creating the wall thickness of my ring shank. So I had done 2 millimeters in this direction. I also want to have a 2 millimeter thickness all around. So that means that I'm adding 2 millimeters to either side of my diameter, or 4 total millimeters. So 16.5 becomes 20.5. So I've added 4 millimeters in my case. You might be different if you've added, if you have a different thickness. So now just to double check that, 20.5, 20.5, and 2. Okay. So you're going to want to just remember those measurements that you had said. For me, I said 2 millimeters this direction, 2 millimeters this direction. We will need this in a little bit, so make a note of that somewhere. So go ahead and show or unhide your previous cylinder. Mine's overlapped. I'm just going to drag it out of the way. And you're going to turn your smaller cylinder, your original one, into a hole. So we are now going to use the drag a bounding box to select both objects, and we're going to use the align tool to align the center points. So for aligning, you want to select the center point nodes of all different orientations. So when I do that, I can see that I've got perfectly lined up center points and my hole extends all the way through to the backside of the solid. So at this point, I'm just going to highlight these to select them together, group them to cut away, and now I have my basic ring shank. So at this point, you want to go ahead and toggle to the front view, so that we can kind of get a nice perspective of these. And then go ahead and just toggle this to flat view rather than orthographic view. So now you're going to duplicate this shank, and you're going to use the arrows to slide your new copy over so that you're positioning the two ring shanks side by side. So for the position itself, you want to get these, I'm going to go a little bit closer here. Basically, depending on how close they are, your little connection arch will be lower. Or if you have them further apart, you'll end up putting that arch a little bit higher, or at least those rings get the ring holes get spaced a little wider. So if you've got sort of big gaps between your fingers, you might go a little wider. If your fingers seem very tightly spaced together, you might go a little bit closer. I'm going to go a little bit closer, but you want to have a little bit of a gap right there in the center. So at this point, we're going to lock these two objects temporarily. And now we're going to go and work on that little arch that I had mentioned before, that little connection point. So to do that, we want to grab a new cylinder, drop it roughly in front of our previous cylinders, and go ahead and change the color. I'm going to refer to this as the pink cylinder, so if you'd like to make that easier, you could change it to pink. So just a little bit in the front, and then again, we are going to rotate this cylinder 90 degrees. And we're also going to increase the number of sides to make this a perfectly smooth cylinder. Okay, so at this point I had mentioned that you're going to want to remember that measurement here and here. So just kind of keep that in mind for the time being. So we're going to now go back to that front view and go ahead and change your snap grid increments from the default of 1 millimeter. You want to change that to 0.25 millimeters. And so that's that you can get a little bit more precision on this next part. So you're going to select the pink cylinder and you want to resize that. I'm holding shift so that this, oops, I'm holding shift. So let's see here. Why are you not? Okay, there we go. You want to, I'm looking for this little box up here. Holding shift so that when you scale it down, it remains cylindrical and doesn't turn into an oval. So you want to sort of scale this down, and I can't really tell you what size this should be. It kind of depends on the ring size itself and also the spacing. But here's what you're going for. You want to get this, I'm using the arrows, in a good position where ideally you want the outer edge of the pink cylinder to match up with the inner edge of the orange ring shanks. And you want there to be as little gap as possible and as little overlap as possible. So let me show you what we're going for. That right there is the perfect overlap. And you can see that this is not in line. That's fine. Really what we're concerned about right now is continuing this curve into this curve and then back down. So once you have that there, we're going to continue to move on. So now you can see that my little pink cylinder is no longer, it's not really in a line, but we have it in the right position. So we are now going to unlock. So select those, unlock, and we're just going to hide these for the moment being. We have a little more work to do on this cylinder. So for the cylinder, go ahead and duplicate and hide one of them. Now we're going to make the inner hole for this cylinder so we can cut it away. So first of all, go ahead and change that to be a hole, and this is your duplicate cylinder. You've got one hidden. So this is now a hole feature, and I had said to remember the wall thickness or the width of your ring band. So this is where you need to kind of recall that information. So the way that I had increased my first cylinder by 2 millimeters on either side, so I went from 16.5 to 20.5 in diameter, I'm now going to decrease by 4 millimeters instead of increasing. So in this case, I'm at 7.75. You'll probably be at something different. I'm now going to drop down to 3.75 and 3.75 so that this cylinder is now 4 millimeters smaller than my original small pink cylinder. Let's go ahead and show all objects again, but I'm just going to say, let's hide you for now. I just want to focus on these two. So now you can see that I have the large cylinder and the small. I'm going to now align these two by highlighting both, clicking align, and again, looking for that center point alignment. So what you're looking for is a perfectly centered inner hole in the solid cylinder. Once you're happy with that, bounding box select, group those. And the last thing you're going to do here is to resize this width right here. And in my case, it's 2 millimeters because I have a 2 by 2 ring shank. Okay, so now we're going to show the cylinders again, and let's just do some alignment here. So let's go ahead and lock these two. And we want to do that so that we can restrain the movement of these. Actually, I'm sorry, don't lock those. You want to actually group those. We want these to act as one central item so that you have a center point that we can use to align this guy. So once you've grouped these, not locked them, you could lock them as well, but really we're looking for the group. We are going to bounding box select all of them, use the align tool once again, and where we're looking for is alignment on this back node only, because your center point should be aligned already. So really, if this is not a black node, go ahead and click that and change that. But these ones should also be grayed out. And then just to visually verify that, we can check the front. That looks really good. Okay. All right. So moving on, let's go ahead and lock these for the moment. Now you're going to grab a box, and we're going to a box hole. We're going to do this to cut away some material in our original ring shanks. So again, navigate to the front view. And you're now going to resize and reposition your box. So what we're looking for, let me just show you and then I'll explain. So I'm going to move this up to make sure that I'm clearing the tops of my ring shanks. I am going to start to resize this. I'm actually going to have to go from the top down to resize this. Move it up into position. Get a little taller, maybe a little wider here. Use the arrows, a little wider further. Okay, so this is roughly the position that I'm looking for, and let me explain why. Actually, now that I get closer, it needs to be a little bit higher. I am essentially trying to cut away all of this internal mid part of the central part of my ring shanks. Everything, all of the orange that is now striped with the box hole, these stripes right here, all of that's going to get cut away. And I'm looking for that because what I essentially want to be left with is a gap from this 12 o'clock point and the 12 o'clock point. All this should be cut so my ring band is shaped in an arc like this. Okay? So you want to really try and aim the bottom of the box hole to be right at that sort of intersect point where your pink cylinder overlaps and sort of tangent right here with your orange cylinder. So for me, that's the placement that I'm looking for. And now I just need to use my align tool on everything. I'm going to navigate top view, use my align tool, look for that top back alignment, visually verify that my box hole cuts through everything, which it does. And I'm just going to unlock the ring shanks. And my ring shanks are still grouped together. You want to have both selected, or if they're grouped, they'll both be selected now. Select your box hole and group to cut away. Okay, so now you can see we're getting pretty close to the end of this ring shank. So now you want to go ahead and lock those lock the ring shank again. And now we're going to cut away this area down here. So grab that box hole, again, place it in front, go to the front view, and then we're going to do sort of the opposite. We're going to now resize this, but now we're focusing on cutting away the pink. So I'm now concerned with getting my my top edge in line with that intersection point between the pink cylinder and the orange cylinder. I'm trying to cut all of this away. So I'm actually just going to increase the height and move this down just to make sure that I'm really ensuring I cut the pink away. Okay, so once you're happy there, you're again going to navigate to the top view, highlight everything, align to, again, that top back. Verify visually that your hole is going to cut through everything. It is. Unlock the cylinder, the pink cylinder. Select the pink cylinder, select the box hole, group it together. Okay, so at this point, just do a quick look over. Are you happy with everything? It looks good. Great. Let's unlock everything here. Bounding box, select all of it, group it together, and now we have one seamless ring. Okay, your ring shank is done. Let's lock it for the time being. So at this point, we are going to move on to the final step, which is adding your script. So the script is the scribble tool. So grab your scribble tool and drop it anywhere in the front. Okay, so you can see that I have a preview up here, and this is like my where my scribble is going to land. So at this point, you have a little blue circle that's frozen to your cursor. You're going to use that like a paintbrush or like a pencil tip. So you're going to write whatever your word is. I'm doing my name. You can do whatever you want. And don't worry right now if it's not perfect. Maybe make the I dot a little bit bigger. I'm going to show you how to edit it in a second. But first, we want to kind of get in position. So we now have an object that you just created yourself. So go to the top view. And again, let's make sure that that top view is flattened. Now just drag your script in place. So this is where you've got to make some decisions about how you want this to look. How big do you want it to be? I think I'm going to go a little smaller, so mine is not really overhanging too much. You want to see if it's centered. You could use the align tool if you'd like to center it, if you want it to be perfect. You don't have to though. And then decide sort of where you want it to be placed as well. So I'm pretty happy with that right there. So at this point, I just need to now resize the thickness of it and move it in place. So first, I'm going to move this into place by just dragging it up in the height. What I want you to be really, really careful about. So toggle to the front view. So right now, I want to make sure that my script is not dropping below this point right here, because this is the ring hole based on your finger size. So if this is too low, you're obviously going to reduce the hole in your ring. If it's way too high, you're going to have extra wiggle room. So you're aiming for like sitting right there, like kind of right intersecting or right above it. That's kind of the perfect spot for it. And now you're going to resize this. So in my case, I recommend 4.5 is kind of as thick as I like to go. It becomes very chunky after that, and I wouldn't go less than about 2 millimeters. So I think I'm going to go about 3 millimeters here. That looks good for me. So basically, this is really where we're just fine tuning now. So the last few steps that I want to do, what I would say is at this point, if you feel like you don't love some details of your script, go ahead and edit it. So when you select it, hit edit scribble, and then now you still have that paintbrush cursor. So you can go in and you can add more if you'd like. If you want some areas to be a little thicker, you can do that. If you want to erase some areas, I'm like, oh gosh, this is a really large dot on my eye. I might erase a little bit. You can do that. Ooh, that's kind of funny. So just make any kind of edits you want. Maybe my tail is a little bit too big. And you say done. So now you've updated your sketch. So you can see my eye has changed, my L tail is thicker, and my little Z tail is a little bit smaller. So go ahead and edit your text to make it how you want it before you finalize everything about your ring. So at this point, a few things. If your text is not, if your letters are not connected like mine is, you do need to connect those. Here's a good example. The I is, this dot is floating. Not going to print that way. You won't be able to fabricate it. It's just floating in air. So I'm going to create a little box. You could do any shape. I think a box is the easy one to work with. Get it sort of scaled down. Navigate to that top view again. In my case, I'm going to go flat top view. And now I'm just going to get way up in here and make a little connector. So I'm going to kind of just put this in place, rotate it. I actually might want to make it a little bit narrower. Rotate it. That was good. And now I just have to lift it so that it's actually intersecting. So any kind of connection points that you have that need to be, so you can connect like this. I would just make sure that the connection is smaller than the actual or shorter than the actual script itself. So I'm actually going to align the bottom right there. And I'm going to make this, in fact, a little bit shorter. I wouldn't go less than about like 2 millimeters in height right there, just to make sure that it's a nice stable connection. So you'll want to connect your any kind of floating letters, and you also want to trim away any kind of little overhangs. I'm actually only going to trim a tiny bit there, right there, and I'm going to trim a decent amount right there. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and lock all this for the moment, make sure it's locked. I'm going to grab a box hole, drop it in place, kind of work in my top view, scale this way down, get it like roughly in the right position, which I think it was like right there. So I really just need to get a very small little box hole here. Put that there, and I'm going to duplicate that and move it over to the other side where I have a lot more to cut away. So I'm going to just drag this nice and big. I'm going to kind of want to keep an eye on, I might rotate this because I've got sort of an angular cut to make. Oops. Sometimes rotating can be a little funny in this top view. I'm going to get out of this top view. So I'm going to rotate this a little bit. If I can grab that arrow, go back to my top view. Did I rotate enough? A little more. Arrows. Okay, so pretty good there. Just need to raise both of these box holes up so that they actually intersect what I want to cut. And in this case, I may need to make them taller. So let's work at one at a time. So for this one, I'm verifying that I actually need to lower it down a little bit so it does in fact cut everything away. Otherwise I'd have this like awkward little shelf right there. So I'm going to move this down a little bit. Actually, I'm just going to make this plenty tall. Make sure that I'm clearly cutting through everything. I also need to widen it or move it over because that's a little sliver left over. Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm trimming off just this like area in here, which that's going to be good on that side. And then moving this side. You might wonder why I haven't hidden my script. It's because I actually want to see what is intersecting and what's not when the script is in place. So again, make this taller so that you're certain that it is intersecting the whole piece. So now I'm like, oof, that's maybe a little bit too far to cut. So I might actually just drag this out and decide, do I like that cut? I think I do, but I think I need to make this box wider. And you can see that I've now also skewed it in this direction, so I'm missing that little corner. So I'm going to pull that this way. Okay. Yeah, that's a good cut for me. I'm happy with that. Okay, so now I'm going to unlock everything, or just really unlock that band for the moment. And I'm going to select my box hole, select my other box hole, select my band, and group all of it to cut away. So at this point, I have a finished ring. I'm really happy with this. Select everything, unlock it, and the last step, let's see here, unlock everything. I guess you have to unlock one at a time. So just make sure everything is unlocked. And then when you group everything together, it's one ring. And now you can go ahead and export this up here, export as an OBJ or as an STL, depending on if you have a preference. But if you're going to use Shapeways or another 3D printing software, they all should take OBJ and STL. And you're done. Thank you so much for joining me.